Frederick Douglass was born in the February of 1818 in Tuckahoe, Maryland. He was born into slavery. He was originally named Frederick Augustus Washington Bailey and was born to Harriet Bailey and a white man, whom he thought was his master, Aaron Anthony. At age 8, he was sent to Baltimore to be a house servant to Hugh Auld. There, Mrs. Auld illegally taught Frederick how to read. In 1841, Frederick Douglass was invited to an anti-slavery convention in Nantucket, Massachusetts, to speak about his experiences as a slave. Another abolitionist, William Lloyd Garrison, was there as well. Yet people in general will say they like colored men as well as any other, but in their proper place. They assign us that place. They don't let us do it for ourselves, nor will they allow us a voice in the decision. They will not allow that we have a head to think, and a heart to feel, and a soul to aspire. They treat us not as men, but as dogs. They cry, "Stew, boy," and expect us to run and do their bidding. That's the way we are liked. You degrade us, and then ask why we are degraded. You shut our mouths, and then ask why we don't speak. You close our colleges and seminaries against us, and then ask why we don't know more. Many people at the convention didn't feel that such an articulate man could ever have been a slave, and so Frederick Douglass felt that he needed to write his autobiography, which he called Life and Times of Frederick Douglass. He started it in 1845, and it was revised and completed by 1882. After the convention, Frederick Douglass went on a 2-year tour to England to escape recapture by his owner, but the abolitionist returned with many supporters and much more. Frederick Douglass also returned with enough money to buy his freedom and to start his own anti-slavery newspaper, which he called the North Star, but it was later changed to Frederick Douglass's paper. It ran from 1847 to 1860 and was published in Rochester, New York. Another famous abolitionist at the time was William Lloyd Garrison, who had created the Liberator. However, Douglass and Garrison did not work together in the beginning.
It was peculiar that Garrison and Douglass didn't unite in the beginning. They met at the anti-slavery convention Douglass had spoken at, and one would think that the two, with such dreams of abolishing slavery, would have teamed up. One reason was that Garrison opposed some of Douglass's ideas, such as believing in political power, like government, to support their cause. Another reason was that Garrison didn't like Douglass publishing a separate black-oriented paper.
In 1861, the Civil War started. During the Civil War from 1861 to 1865, Frederick Douglass became a consultant to President Abraham Lincoln, saying that former slaves in the North should be armed, and that the war should be mainly about slavery. He was so passionate about fighting this war to abolish slavery that he recruited his own sons, Charles and Lewis Douglass, who both joined the famous 54th Massachusetts Regiment. After the war, between 1865 and 1877, a time known as the Reconstruction period occurred. During this time, the South had to change its laws because now the slaves they depended so much on had been freed. During this time, Frederick Douglass was an advocate for full civil rights of all men, and he also supported women's suffrage. After the Reconstruction period, Frederick Douglass served as an assistant secretary of the Santo Domingo Commission in 1871, and from 1877 to 1881, he served as a marshal at the District of Columbia and a recorder of deeds in the District of Columbia from 1881 to 1886. Finally, from 1889 to 1891, he was appointed the U.S. Minister and Consul General to Haiti. These accomplishments made Frederick Douglass the first African-American citizen to ever hold a high U.S. government rank. Although he was the first African-American citizen to ever hold a high U.S. government rank, Frederick Douglass is remembered in history because he was a slave who then turned to a brave abolitionist who was willing to speak his mind.